Welcome to the Base Coat Brainiac podcast. My name is Austin Hauser. If you own a painting business and you're listening in, you're in the right place. So today I have the lesser half of the Kuyper family duo. Sorry, Matt, us husbands have to take one for the team sometime. Matt Kuyper of Harpeth Painting, the $8 million painting empire outside of Nashville, Tennessee. Matt is a recent roaster on the Roast of Nick Slavic and has been called the whale hunter for commercial painting projects. Those are Maggie's words, not mine. And he is here today to talk to us all things commercial painting. So Matt, first of all, again, thank you for taking the time out of your day to be here.
Awesome. Glad to talk to you.
So we've heard Maggie's side of the Harpeth Painting story, but I want to hear it from you. You're a husband and wife duo with 3 kids, running an $8 million painting company. How'd you get here?
Wow. So I pinch myself sometimes, and also for context, this year it's going to be over 10. So wow. It's just wild. We started 7 years ago, and it really started as a side job for me. And I had experience in the construction industry and the commercial painting industry prior to starting Harpeth Painting. So there was a little bit of a learning curve that I went through before I actually started the company. And then just one thing after another, solving problems, finding clients, and here we are today.
Yeah, so you guys are 8 figures. That's incredible. I think that's a very rare feat in this industry. Mm-hmm. Let's go back to the beginning, though. Talk to me about that learning curve, because in this industry, we work with the majority of our clients are going to be on the residential side. I would say the majority also try to offer commercial, but there's different spectrums of commercial painting, and it's a completely different estimating and sales process. So again, take us back to the very beginning. What does that learning curve look like? How did you break into the commercial space?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I actually had a learning curve to get into residential because my background has been in commercial construction and commercial painting. And when you start out, it's true. It's hard to just go do your first big commercial job. So I had to figure out how to do residential work, which was, it's the same but different. And I was doing some of the hands-on stuff. I was doing a lot of the cabinet painting. I was learning. I was watching YouTube videos to figure out how to do this from a residential perspective. And once you get that base, some financial flow, some financial footing, I had some relationships, and we were able to start doing some $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 commercial jobs. And once you get a few of those under your belt, people trust you a little bit more, and you can expand from there. And then in determining whether you want to do new construction or repaint. And I had new construction background, so that's really where I went at first. But obviously we love the repaint market. That's a great place to be if you can be there.
Totally. So you mentioned repaint versus new build, and it's obviously going to be the same on the residential side. Do you guys consider residential new build part of the commercial umbrella?
We kind of go back and forth on that. I think Maggie gave you the same answer of it's such a weird place to put that because the projects can be as big. Some of these custom home new construction projects we do are $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 paint jobs, which is a lot like a commercial size job, but they're still different. We don't really know where to put them in our vertical. We've kind of gone back and forth whether that's in commercial or is it residential. We don't know. It's a challenge, honestly, that we're going through where that kind of falls in our org chart.
So anybody listening in, you still face challenges even as an 8-figure painting company, all right?
Oh yeah.
Just don't go away.
They just get bigger.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly. So let's talk about the types of commercial projects that you guys typically focus on. Obviously there's new build and repaint, but in that umbrella, there's going to be a spectrum of different types of commercial painting projects. There's going to be a big difference between a doctor's office and a football stadium. So, and also industrial, right? Let's talk about that. Where do you guys find your sweet spot?
We really do well in the kind of the typical commercial market if it's a little more complex. So like event venues, churches, or a lot of healthcare stuff here in Nashville has been very, very good for us. something that's more than just painting a bunch of offices, because that's just typically a race to the bottom of, how, especially like multifamily stuff, we don't do any of that. So the more complex it is, the better we end up tending to do. But under that umbrella is pretty much anything that's a building other than multifamily.
And when you say complex and you like complexity, is that due to the fact that the pricing favors your margins?
Favors margin. It becomes more of a negotiation, less about price and more about capacity and speed and understanding. What's been really fun for us is in the commercial world, these people come in with, hey, we've got this, the architect is asking for this plaster finish in this room. Like, do you guys do that? And it's like, yeah, we do, because we do it on the residential side. So we can bring that high-end finishing expertise into the commercial world, where a lot of people will be like, no, we don't know how to do that.
Yeah, right.
So it may be a small portion of the job, but it ends up securing us the whole project because we can offer that as a package deal.
So let's look at let's say a multi-7-figure residential painting company that is interested in breaking into commercial. We all know that it's built on relationships, right? You can do some light advertising, brand awareness is more where it's at. But where would you recommend somebody like that start at to go about finding new commercial projects to even bid on?
Yeah. So you specifically asking for new commercial, not repaint?
Let's take each of those specifically.
Yeah,
So
yeah. On the new construction side, it is definitely a slow burn, long play relationship building process. There are all those bid platforms out there where you can Building Connected, I Square Foot, whatever all the other ones are. And I don't even know, because we've gone so much into relationship stuff. But it's trying to figure out what type of project you want to go after first, and figuring out who those contractors are and networking with them, trying to figure out who they're using now. That kind of indicates their market and what they're looking for. And honestly, some of the smaller ones get in there and do a super competitive bid, not saying give it away, but do it for a little bit less than you normally would to get in the door and show them what you can do. And that's really how you can start that relationship. You don't want to do that on a big job or do it all the time, but it's kind of a cost of advertising almost.
Yeah. Now, would that be the same on the repaint side as well? Or
the repaint side works a lot more like the residential side, where we do the typical email stuff, Facebook. It really is the same as residential. And since you know who your customers are, you can pick up the phone and call, you can stop by. So there is a little more of a grassroots, boots on the ground aspect to the commercial repaint as well.
Yeah,
you got to do it all. You can't just do one thing.
Right. And I think where a lot of guys need to get outside of their comfort zone is on the estimating side, right? You mentioned some of these can be very complex and require different mindsets and experience.
Yeah.
How do you go about estimating a commercial project? How does that differ from a typical residential project?
So a lot of people get, I don't know what the word is, like, just because it's big doesn't necessarily mean it's hard. So they just get like, oh my gosh, where do I even start? So just start breaking a project down into smaller portions. And it's really no different than a residential thing. It's like, think of it in terms of, say it's a hotel. It's really just a bunch of bedrooms. So just because it's big doesn't necessarily mean it's complex when you start breaking it down into its parts. Same thing, say it's a big like exterior tilt-up building or something like that. Just start thinking of, okay, I have this 1,000 square foot side, break it down into, okay, I know I can go over there and we can do 200 square feet an hour. And so we can do this section in 2 days, and then just do that for the whole building. So start breaking it down into its smaller parts.
Yeah. And when we look at the overall buying cycle of a commercial project, I imagine that's going to vary between new build and repaint as well.
Yeah.
Very unlike the residential side, where you're getting maybe a down payment up front and you're proceeding with the project, and then you get one on completion. What does that look like in terms of the actual bidding process on commercial?
So yeah, it's funny. We have backlog of projects that may not start for 2 years we already have a contract for. We're doing a high rise downtown Nashville that I think the first time I bid it for the budget phase was maybe a year and a half ago. Final bid was maybe 3 or 4 months ago. We've been sitting on the contract, and we probably won't be on site for another year and a half. So, which is great because you have that backlog in place, but it's definitely a long cycle. And excuse me, that's why it's good to have some of that residential stuff or that repaint stuff in your pipeline, because that stuff can fill. It's easier to plug and play, whereas you got to be careful with the new construction to not sell a bunch of stuff that's all going to hit at the same time 2 years from now, and you don't have capacity to do it.
Yeah, and that brings up a great point. So there are phases to bidding a commercial project. What does that typically look like on just your average commercial project?
So a lot of what we do, the contractors will send they call it like a DD budget, design development, which is a set of plans that isn't really complete, but it's got enough of the square footage and room layouts that they're looking for help just to get a number plugged. And a lot of times with those, if we have good data on it, I can just look at the building square footage and say, hey, this is a $4 square foot standard commercial job. I don't have to do a full takeoff on it. I can kind of get close enough for this phase and not spend a bunch of time on it. And then there might be a 50% set of drawings, just confirm, look again. Again, they're looking for good partnership on people that are going to spend the time in this budget phase to help them, basically. And a lot of people get frustrated by that. It's like, oh, they're using me, but you think of it as it's like a marketing cost or advertising cost. You're getting a chance to stay in touch with them and prove that you know about this project. And then when the final bid comes, they're going to look to you to really put a sharp number on it, and they're going to give you the chance because you were there helping them through all the budget phases.
So the initial budget phase, how long does that on average typically take to get through?
Man, it depends on the size of the project, but for me, because I've looked at so many of these, I almost know when I open the set of plans that oh, this is 150 grand.
Yeah.
But I would say you comb through everything. It takes a couple hours maybe on a big project. It's a smaller one and you do it in 30 minutes.
Has there ever been a scenario where you've submitted an initial budget and then it's varied dramatically from the final budget that you've delivered as it gets closer to that project?
Usually only if the scope changes a lot. We've done some where it's you send you assume it's all painting. So you send $100,000 budget, and then the final set of plans come back and it's got all wall covering. So it's going to be 5 times that amount, but the scope changed. So they understand that.
Got it. Okay. Now, commercial projects in general, again, there is a spectrum to those. Are there any, other than you said multifamily units, are there any other types of projects that you like to avoid for any particular reason?
Not really. And we wouldn't necessarily avoid multifamily. Just in our market, it's a race to the bottom. We just can't be competitive in that market. Some people do really well there. If that's what you do, it's not bad. We just haven't figured out a way for us to be competitive at it. But everything else we'll pretty much look at. Again, it's more about who it is, who you're working with, who the contractor is, who the property manager is, more than what the actual project is. Yeah.
And you mentioned contractors. What types of relationships do you find to be the most valuable to you? So there's going to be things like GCs, property management companies. Where do you find the most bang for your buck in terms of the actual relationship itself?
So those two are really the primary ones. Property managers are great because they're easy to find. You know who they are, and they have budgets that they need to use. They have multiple properties a lot of times. So going to one person gets you a lot of opportunity. And same thing with general contractors. When you have that one that you like, you're working with one of their project managers or one of their pre-con team, and then they'll spread it in the office. Like, hey, these guys are great to work with. Who else do you want to meet in the office? And those are easier than the you know, Joe building owner who owns one building.
Yeah. Are there any red flags that you like to look out for in those relationships? So a type of GC or property management company that you like to avoid?
The red flags are easier to spot with the general contractors because word gets around town. Even though Nashville's a big market, there's certain contractors that we know they send us stuff all the time and want us to bid. And we're like, heard too many bad things about you guys on payment or process or safety, all kinds of different things. So it's a pretty limited group of contractors that we actually want to work with in Nashville. I mean, it's less than 10.
Wow. So is there any way to vet contractors or vet those relationships ahead of time? Are there certain questions that you'd recommend somebody ask?
I've never really done it that way. That would probably be an interesting thought experiment, but I've just relied on other trades in town. You know, you can hear it from the drywall guys, you can hear it from the electricians. Being part of these contractor networking things like ABC or AGC here in town, it's pretty easy to hear through the grapevine of who you want to work with.
Yeah. Do you find a lot of value from those different networking groups out there? Is that where you find that relationships typically stem from?
They're great, and they're probably a really good way to establish those relationships, but they're also really good at maintaining them. It may be a contractor that you don't work for all the time, and then you run into them and you get something, you know, it's been a year and a half since you've done anything with them, but you'd say, hey, how are you doing? I haven't seen you in forever. And they send a bid invite, and then you're working with them again.
Love it. Yeah. I think relationships are, I think, where we see a lot of guys struggle with. It's something that it seems like a big mountain to climb, but you get your foot in the door. To your point, you bid competitively, you prove yourself, and then at that point, that opens up the door for a lot more downstream.
Yeah.
You mentioned pricing. Talk to me a little bit about pricing on commercial projects in terms of how that typically is paid out on your end, because as I understand it, commercial projects typically require you to front some of the labor costs. Is that correct?
Yeah. So we're interesting because we don't do deposits for any of our work, even for our residential work, which I know can be a little unique. But yeah, the payment cycle in commercial projects is a lot longer. So ideally it's going to be 30 days. It's typically not. It's typically 60, sometimes 90. So yeah, you are having to front a lot of costs before you get paid. That's a reason a lot of people get scared of it. But if you have that, that's what was helpful of us having that residential base, and a lot of people coming from residential into commercial. The margins are so good in residential that ideally you're making 20% net profit, which can help you get into the commercial world. And once you get in, it's a fine process, but it's that first maybe 6-8 months to a year where cash flow can be an issue. You need to be very intentional about managing that.
And what do the margins look like on the commercial side compared to residential?
So we shoot for 35 to 40% GP on commercial because the overhead is typically lower. You don't have those marketing costs. You don't have a project manager in commercial can manage a whole lot more than in residential as far as volume goes. But we're ending up in the same kind of 15% net profit area on that stuff.
Got it. Okay. And let's actually talk about the project size. So the project size, I imagine, varies dramatically between one project to another.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any limits on one end of that spectrum that you like to avoid, depending on the size of the overall project?
So I'd say it almost depends on if there's a relationship there or not. If it's a new client or somebody we don't work with a lot and they keep asking us to do these little $500 come paint 2 door frames, we're probably not going to continue to do that. But if it's a contractor that we're doing multi-million dollars a year of work with and like, hey, we've got this little thing over here, can you come knock that out? And like, we're going to do that.
Sure.
It seems to be our sweet spot is kind of the I know this is a broad range, but like the $70,000 to $300,000 project is like a really good sweet spot for us. You're doing them in a few months. You can see progress. I don't know that I'm kind of spitballing off the top of my head, but that really does seem like our sweet spot.
So let's take that range then, 700 or 70K to 300. What does a team size typically look like on a project of that stature? And then, are you guys using W2 subs, a mix of the two? Like, what does all that look like for you?
We're primarily subs, and so on a project, really, it's interesting. You're not going to have that much more manpower on a $300,000 job than you are on a $70,000 job. It's just a longer duration. Even on some of our largest project that we had going on in Ohio the last 2 years, I think it ended up being over $2 million, but I think we only had maybe 15 guys at max on there, but it just took forever. So most of these are not large crew sizes. It can be 3 to 7 guys. Just the duration ends up being longer. So that's something else that a lot of people think about is commercial. You got to have a crew of, 50. Now there is going to be jobs where that's the case, but most of them are not.
Yeah. And I think this is where everybody just gets in their own head and looks at these projects. They're like, that's totally out of my league.
Mm-hmm.
But in reality, it doesn't need to be. And let's talk a little bit about what GCs and property managers look for in a commercial painter. So they come to you, or you go to them, you bid a project. Money's part of it, but what are the maybe soft skills or KPIs that they're looking for in a commercial painter?
So I would say for general contractors, it's hard to say number one because it may not always be number one, but number one is price. They want to, and it's not like being the cheapest. If they have 3 bids or 5 bids, they want everything to be, they don't want somebody to be up here, somebody to be down here, and somebody in the middle. They want confidence that whoever they're hiring is the right price, because that reduces their risk. If they always are taking somebody that's way low, that may be a risk for them, that these people aren't going to be around, or they're not looking at the job the right way. So a good general contractor is going to have a level scope and everything's going to be close. So if that's the case, then they're looking for, do we have confidence that they can complete this project? Like, are they reducing the risk for turning this building over to the owner on time? And then they typically look for somebody who safety is big, and then also who does the process of working with them correctly, because there's paperwork, there's submittals that they don't want to have to worry about that stuff, like hounding us, like, hey, you got to turn this in. We're waiting on this. They want somebody that's just going to make it easy for them. So to summarize, it's price, then it's process, and safety is probably up there in the top 5.
So how do you, as a commercial painter, how do you prove yourself in each one of those categories? So obviously price comes with experience. I think we can all attest to that. But, the things about confidence, having the confidence that you're going to be able to get the job done on time, like how important is deadlines, and how do you communicate that during a bidding process?
That kind of goes back to building those relationships. They don't know the first time they hire you. And that's why you got to get in the door with some of these smaller projects. And they're like, oh, the project manager, like our project manager, was really responsive and talked to the superintendent and made it easy. And, didn't nickel and dime us on punch list things. And that's how you do it. You just got to prove it.
Yeah. I think a good word to describe that is professionalizing your company, right?
Yeah.
Having a branded shirt, showing up on time, doing the little things goes a long way, right?
It's all the normal things that, like, not to burn our industry, but it's a lot of people just don't have that stuff. Like sending in a PDF instead of a Word document that's still wide open, like just normal standard business practices and professionalism go a long way in commercial work too.
Yeah. It's crazy. It doesn't take a lot.
Yeah.
What about safety? So I think this is where commercial drastically differs from residential. On the residential side, you're going to have different safety standards in each state, as far as actual requirements go. But on the commercial side, it's definitely more important. Are there any certifications that GCs or property management companies typically look for? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah. So I'd say really this only applies to general contractors. A lot of the property managers know and care less than they should. So we're doing large projects, and obviously we go through our safety program and protocol, but they don't ask for any of it. And it's like, you guys, you should be asking for this stuff. But the general contractors have requirements. Obviously, there's the OSHA requirements. So it does vary a lot on what they require, but we try to meet the premium, like the most, the strictest general contractor that we work for, we meet their requirements and the OSHA requirements, and then everybody else is a piece of cake.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit more about your team. So you mentioned one project manager can obviously manage a lot more volume. And then you guys are primarily subs. How do you go about finding your team? What does the makeup of your team typically look like, and how does that differentiate between that and residential, if at all?
Yeah. So really interestingly, my first project manager and estimator, we do both. So project manager estimates their own projects in the commercial side. I hired him, and he had no experience in painting, or really he was a younger guy, is a younger guy. So I have him. He's learned very quickly, very good guy, great self-starter. But it was more of a process of him having to work with me for a long time to get him up to speed. And then I've also got a guy who's a 30-year veteran of the industry. But they're essentially capable now of doing the same thing. So Reese has been with me 5 years, and he's totally capable of doing any project now within 5 years, from no experience to 5 years in.
Love it. So those project manager estimators, where did you go about finding them?
So Reese was a friend of mine through the hunting world. We had met each other at duck hunts and dove hunts, and I just saw his aptitude and personality and kind of looped him in and took him under my wing. And no job ad, no job offer, anything like that, just through my network. And then Will, the guy that came with experience, we had actually kind of more intentionally put out, hey, we're looking for this person, did the LinkedIn stuff, did the, forget the other job ad places we used. And I got like 100 terrible applications. And then a friend of mine who lives in Florida connected me with Will, who lives in Nashville. It's like, hey, this guy would be perfect. He was working for another contractor. And again, so it just, almost everybody we've hired, even though we've put out these ads, have come through our network.
Yeah. Relationships are the pinnacle of running a successful business in every shape and form. Yeah. When you look at hiring, do you primarily look at skill set, culture? Does one of those two prioritize over the other?
Culture for sure. Yeah. And skill is definitely a part of it, but you can, like the example with Reese, he came with I wouldn't say no skill, but he was a newbie to the industry, but I knew I wanted to work with him. Same thing with Will. So you probably see it on our social media. Like, our whole company loves hanging out together. We took everybody down to PCA. Everybody stayed up way too late, having too much fun. Like, we're just a good team, and that's what makes it fun. And you got to be able to do your job, but we're looking for people who fit our culture and our team primarily.
Totally. Yeah. Having that family environment in your company makes it so much easier to show up every day and, enjoying the people that you actually like to work with helps a lot. Right.
Yeah.
And I couldn't agree more. Culture, you can train somebody up, but they need to be a good fit. You need to be able to want to socialize with them because,
Yep.
again, it's all about relationships.
Yep.
Let's talk a little bit about your subs. So I know a lot of guys who struggle finding good subs. I know you're probably going to say your network, but where do you find good subs? How do you go about vetting them, especially like let's say on some of these larger projects where it does require slightly more subs, or you're doing multiple projects and you have to test out some new people? What does that look like on your side?
Yeah. So initially, looking back 7 years ago, I got pretty lucky coming from the industry where I had several guys that like, hey, whenever you start doing your own thing, we're with you. So they were kind of already in the wings, ready to go, and they were small at the time. So, I think our primary guy was maybe him, his brother, and his buddy, and now he's got a business that he's doing $3 million of revenue as a sub. He's got 20 something guys, and so we've helped him build his business as we've built ours. It's like, hey, here's a good insurance agent, here's a good CPA, here's where we bank, and here's some tricks on how to do payroll. And so we've kind of coached. We love to get those smaller sub companies in and help them grow, and then they see that as a partnership. And now it's this crazy self-fulfilling cycle where when we need new subs, we just reach out to the ones we have. It's like, hey, we're looking for some more to expand, and we get a bunch of people.
So good. Yeah. Treating them as if you were to be, treating a typical W-2 employee, I think is so important. And I know Brad Ellison has a very similar mindset. His subs take him out to dinner. I mean, they're like family to him. And I think that relationship building is so important. And it speaks volumes on the commercial side where you need to know people.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit more about the commercial industry and just maybe how it differs from residential. So on the residential side, as you probably know, the industry is relatively seasonal. It tends to die off in Q4 when we're around the holidays, back to school season. If anybody's on vacation, they're not typically thinking about repainting their house. So, volume typically drops around those times of the year. How does that relate to the commercial side, if at all?
That's one thing I love about the commercial world is that it's really not seasonal or cyclical, other than maybe just it's a little more economically dependent. Like when the economy is good, there's more going on. When the economy is bad, there's less going on, which, residential may be that way too, but it's a little more noted in the commercial world. But that's a great thing that helps us balance out our kind of the annual revenue cycles, even with exterior versus interior in the winter. We're in Nashville where we can sometimes work outside all year long, but it's harder to produce exterior work for about 3 or 4 months out of the year. So that's where that commercial stuff can really help us even out our revenue stream over the entire year.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why we've been really preaching for many of our clients to focus more on commercial as well, just to help with that seasonality. I am curious in terms of, you mentioned the economics of our market. Have you noticed any trends over the last, 4 or 5 years? How have things been moving recently? Notice any decline? What does all that look like on your side?
So I can only really speak for Nashville. That's our market. And I'd say it's a atypical market, that it's probably a little bit stronger than the country as a whole. Over the last 5 years, we had the same COVID blip that everybody had in the positive. We weren't like the Northeast, I think actually Northwest got hit hard negatively by COVID, but I think the rest of the country, it's like people are sitting at home and getting all this government money. And I remember we had a outdoor kind of all hands meeting with our employees and a bunch of our good subs. And it's like, guys, I don't know what this next year is going to look like. I'm going to try to keep you busy. Like, we just don't know. And then like 2 weeks later, we couldn't keep up. And the same thing in the commercial world. Like it was harder to produce projects because they were trying to figure out, there's 100 people on a job site, how to keep everybody separate. And but it was balls to the wall. So now this year, it's starting to be more normal, which is, it feels slow, but it's not slow. It's just not as crazy as it was, both in the residential and the commercial world.
Yeah. The COVID rush is what we call that.
Yeah.
So many guys got into this industry, right around that time frame, and it's been a steady decline, not to pre-COVID levels, but or I'm sorry, not past pre-COVID levels, but just to pre-COVID levels, where it's
Yeah.
back to a more normal pace.
Yeah.
And a lot of guys look at that, they're like, "No, this is a down market." It's like, no, no, no. We were just in a very different market back
Yep.
then that
Yep.
positively benefited most of the country.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about the commercial real estate market. I'm not sure if you're aware, but a lot of commercial loans are coming up due here in the near future,
Yeah.
and we've really shifted from an in-office environment into everybody's now on Zoom working out of the house. Have you noticed any trends over there and how that's impacted the commercial painting space?
Yeah. It's a big, I'd call it a concern, especially in the office market. I would say we probably did our last office tower construction project that we'll do for a long time last year. We probably won't do another one for 10 years,
Wow.
would be my guess. Because there's no demand for office. It's overbuilt right now. All these loans are coming due. But what's been very good is healthcare has been very strong, and manufacturing and industrial has been very strong. And again, I think a lot of that was the onshoring of stuff post COVID, when we had all these supply issues. And then, I mean, healthcare, it's not going away. Everybody's getting older. Educational is still, institutional is still strong by us. Colleges, universities, churches, still very strong in our market. But the new office stuff is basically gone.
Have you heard any rumblings as to what that's going to look like here in the near future? Like, a lot of these buildings aren't even zoned for residential, so it's not like you can easily convert an office building into an apartment complex, right?
Yeah.
Have you heard anything about what that's going to look like here over the next 5 to 10 years?
From what I'm hearing, both from commercial real estate advisors and the general contractors, is a lot of that stuff's just going to get renegotiated. The banks they can't sell it, so they're going to renegotiate these loans to whatever is the lesser of two evils. They'd rather somebody hold on to that project than take a massive loss on it, make something. So that's what I hear, is a lot of this is just going to get renegotiated and be hard on the banks. I don't think there's going to be massive failures from what I hear, but it's definitely probably going to put lending pressure on other industries as well.
For sure. Yeah, it'll be really interesting. I think it's one of those unknown aspects of our economy that not many people have heard about yet, but it's going to be coming forefront here over the next year or two.
That's what a lot of people say, is you can take these commercial office buildings and change them into residential, but it is not that easy. They're built totally differently. The zoning, the parking, the amenities, you can do it, but it's a massive capital project to do that.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these buildings are built around fire escapes, which are completely different between those two types of buildings. I mean, it's not just a matter of putting up some drywall and studs.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see how the market changes in that regard. What are some of the struggles, let's say on the commercial side, that you've seen over the experience of your career, that you might be able to call out for others who are looking to get into the commercial space to look out for? So some potential roadblocks, potholes, anything like that.
And I think the biggest thing is, because the duration on a lot of these projects is so long, that if you get stuck with a bad team, either from the project manager, the superintendent, or the company as a whole, and you're stuck with them for a year, and it's just, you just want to poke your eyes out sometimes. Like, hopefully none of my previous customers are listening to this, but it's like, it's just painful, and you got to finish the job. So you just get in these ruts sometimes where you're like, this sucks, because this guy's calling me and he's just an ass.
Yeah, it's not like you can really walk away from
No.
a small residential project like you can on the commercial side.
You're a residential project, you're like, man, this homeowner's terrible, but in 2 days you're done.
Yeah, right. It's in it for the long haul.
Yeah.
Any other challenges that you've come across? I mean, again, just because you guys are an 8-figure company doesn't mean that you guys don't have challenges. So I always like to look at, the world of business coaching. Obviously, I use your father-in-law, brilliant gentleman. And I'm a business coach and advisor for most aspects of my life, not only on the personal side, but also on the professional side, where I have different coaches for different parts of the company, an operations, finance coach, and they've really helped us excel. So I kind of look to people like you in the industry who are more figureheads, who've already walked the walk and paved that path. What are some other challenges that you've seen your company face personally that you might be that others might find that they can relate to in their own industry?
Yeah. So I think probably there's two big ones that come to mind. One was about, well, it was right when COVID started. So I probably 19 or 20, somewhere around there. We were doing kind of our first big 8-floor high-end commercial office build out. And there was $300,000 or $400,000 of wall covering that we had to purchase, and cash became a real issue because the contractor was trying to figure out COVID protocol and timing. And we had to, we were living on our line of credit for 6 months, and I did not like that at all. So it was not like a go out of business thing, but it was very uncomfortable from a cash perspective. And I don't know there's anything that we could have or would have done differently, because the project ended up great and we climbed out of that hole. And I think it was just a time and place thing of, they were paying slow because it was a client that was out of the tenant was based out of New York City, and they were just having trouble getting things going there because of COVID, and it just delayed everything. And we were the ones at the bottom of the totem pole getting delayed payment and trying to keep the project rolling. And everybody had good intentions, but it was tough from a cash perspective.
Yeah. Cash flow can stress just about anybody out in the form of being, in that seat. I mean, as a business owner, you're the one taking all the risk here, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
I'm sorry, I have one more. Actually, this one's more recent. It was last year, this very large industrial project that we had that we came in to rescue a failing painting contractor. The general contractor fired them. We came in, and long story short, there was a number that we basically had to get to do this job. We knew what to do. We knew the process, but since this other contractor was fired, there was only so much money to do it. And I thought it was a good amount. And we ended up losing our shirts on that job. And, again, we did a good job, great relationship with the contractor. It was a fun project, but we made $0 on a very large project. And you're like, we did all this work for nothing.
What did you learn from that? And did that relationship turn into any future projects?
Yes. And it was funny. I actually had a breakfast with that contractor 2 weeks ago, and we're on a few other projects with them, and they voluntarily offered to compensate us well on some other projects, kind of above and beyond to catch us up from that project. So that's, again, where the relationship thing really can save you.
So good.
Yeah.
So as a business owner, I look at, skill set maybe being 10% of the overall equation, mindset being the other 90%. It takes a lot of willpower, motivation, and drive to run a successful company. So at the size that you guys are at, the number of employees you guys have, what do you think it takes to really have the right mindset to be that leader and have the vision to take your company to that next level?
Grit and resiliency are huge. I'm sure you've seen that graph of like the entrepreneur's journey, the squiggly line. So you got to be able to go through days where, like, I don't think we're going to make it. I'm the worst ever. My team is terrible. My painters are terrible. Like, we're going to be out of business tomorrow. To the next day, you're like, God, we're awesome. This is so easy. We're making all this money and we're not doing anything like that. You got to be able to ride that journey and not be too hard on yourself one way or the other. You you can't always think you're the best, and you can't always think you're the worst. You've got to have the mindset that you're in this for the long haul. You're a professional problem solver at this point, and just be resilient with that mindset.
That roller coaster ride, everybody goes through it. And I feel like it's
Yep.
not talked about enough.
Mm-hmm.
The dark days feel super dark, and the
Yep.
up days typically don't feel up enough. And I think that's where a lot of guys, you need to appreciate where you're at in life, the fact that
Mm-hmm.
it's probably not going to all come crashing down, and just having your eye on the ball. Which does lead me into my next question. Where do you see the future of Harpeth Painting over the next 3 to 5 years?
So we don't have, the last 7 years have been all about kind of growth and revenue goals and developing a team. And we finally, intentionally, kind of got to that level where now it's more of an optimization goal of letting everybody kind of catch up, be really good at their role. I think, we have some smaller revenue goals, but it's not going to be to get to 20 million. We might accidentally get there based on the rate we keep going, but it's really just kind of now pouring into developing the team that we have and getting everybody, our systems more optimized for how big we are, our culture more optimized for how big we are. And I've been taking a giant step back as far as like the actual tasks that I do in the business. So kind of seeing how that's working, kind of just pausing on that for a while and stepping back and letting it do its thing and see where we need to adjust from there.
I think as business owners, we always look at the financial aspect and say, that's a goal that I want to shoot for. A lot of us fail to understand that freedom, time is part of that as well. And being able to step back and go on, trips with the family. In my opinion, that's just as important as any dollar amount.
Mm-hmm.
And which actually leads me into my question about you and Maggie running a business together as a husband and wife couple. How do you do that? As my wife has already told me, she will not work for me because she likes to do facials on days where she has to work. And I told her that she wouldn't be allowed to do that. So
Yeah.
What does that look like for you? And like, how do you guys, go through some of those challenging times where it might be dark and, you guys having to keep a positive light in front of your kids?
Yeah. I was going to bring this up when you were asking the question about the entrepreneur's journey. And because we work together, like when she has a bad day, I'm also having a bad day.
Yeah.
Or when she has a good day, I'm probably having a good day. So it's not like one of us can come home and the other person's in a totally different place. We're always stuck kind of in parallel, which is a challenge. But I'd much rather be doing that with her than with some other person or by myself. So we just, I think you guys probably talked about it more on your podcast, but it's just pouring into that relationship through just open communication. And we've done a lot of individual and marriage counseling and therapy and knowing how to talk to each other. And just emotional maturity, I think, is a huge part of that.
Yeah.
I'd much rather work with her than by myself. I don't do well by myself.
Man, it feels lonely up there at the top, right? And having that partner by your side is very helpful.
Yeah.
And I'm glad to hear that you guys are actually leveraging that. I think a lot of guys look at that as almost like a weakness, but in your case, it is a strength, which is great. So we've talked a lot about just the whole commercial industry as a whole, and I think you've done a great job of breaking this down, which a lot of guys, again, seem like a mountain to climb into a very simple process. What other processes do you guys have in your company that may differ between commercial and residential, if any?
Financial stuff is different. Like our accounting manager with the residential project, it's send an invoice, get paid. Our process on commercial, it differs by contractor, it differs by project or a property manager. So just having a good understanding of the processes that they require, so you get paid on time, and it's not hey, you're missing this form or you missed this thing, and then it pushes you back another 30 days. So the billing issue is a little different. Obviously, sales and marketing is totally different on the new construction side, but it's oddly similar. Most of it's the same. We schedule the same way. We We all hang out together. It's not like it's the commercial team and the residential team. It's all kind of one company, one deal.
Yeah. And on the estimating side, just to revisit that once more, I've noticed that there's a lot of third-party commercial estimating companies out there where they'll actually, take a project in, do the estimating for you, send it back, you pay them a small fee. Do you have any experience with any of those companies? Are they worth their time and energy? What does that look like for you guys?
So there's a difference between estimating and takeoff. So most of these companies are just doing the takeoff, which is measuring the substrates. You wouldn't want a third party doing your production rates or your unit pricing because it varies by company, by subgroup, by location. But we do sometimes use third-party takeoff services when we get backlog because it's great. They just send you a spreadsheet and the plan. It's all marked up, ready to go, and you can just plug your unit rates or your production rates in there. The downside to that is when you sit down with the contractor, like, hey, do you remember this room? Did you get this? Or what? They got a question about the project. You're like, I got to go look because you're not familiar. You didn't do it yourself. So you don't know the answers to those questions. So it's something we try not to do unless we're just a little backlog and it's a straightforward project. But I would much rather do it in-house so you're familiar with the project. And we're not doing that much just bid. We've got a pretty good understanding if we're going to get the project in the long run or not.
Love it. So Matt, based on all of your experience working in this industry, I always like to ask, what's your greatest insight? If you could yell one thing from the rooftop that every business owner should follow or hear to help avoid some of those roadblocks in life or professionally, what would that be?
It's kind of a catch-22 phrase, so I want to be careful, but a lot of people I don't want to use the dumb Nike phrase, but you just got to do it. Like at some point you just need to do the commercial job, or you just need to hire the guy, or like obviously calculated risk. But so many people I think get stuck in this, like, what if, or the timing's not right. Sometimes you just got to take those risks as an entrepreneur and make it work. Now, don't take a risk that's going to put you out of business, but there's oftentimes you see it on Facebook of what do you guys think about this? It's like sometimes you just got to do it and figure it out as you go. That's the entrepreneur's journey. Is talking about building the plane as you're flying it or whatever. And I don't know how to make that succinct in a phrase, but it's hard. Do it. Calculated risk. That's the entrepreneur's journey.
Totally. I couldn't agree more. Analysis paralysis, it gets the best of us. Yeah. And I like to, summarize that as you can know what to do, but not do what you know. Execution is greater than knowledge. There's a lot of smart people out there that don't just take the first step and, as you said, do it. Yeah. It's the hardest part about starting anything is just starting it. Once you start it, the rest of it tends to be a lot less painful than you think. Yeah. It's part of the reason I do cold plunges is because once you're in that cold water, it's not as bad as the build up to getting in it. Yeah. And, exactly. It's the same way with everything else in life, right?
Yeah. I think it's Jason Paris quoting Brad Ellison, quoting Abraham Lincoln. Little inside joke there. That you got to iterate quickly, and you can't iterate if you don't take that first step. So if you do something and didn't work, change it quickly, move on. If that didn't work, that's how I think we've grown so fast and so well, is that we do it and we adjust quickly. We don't just keep doing the wrong thing. We're going to fix it and keep moving on until something else breaks.
Don't make the same mistake twice. Yeah. You just keep plugging those holes.
Yeah.
Matt, all of your insights have been great today. I really do appreciate you taking the time out of your day to be here. Tell the wife and father-in-law I said hey, and again, thank you for your time. Enjoy the time with your family.
I will. Thanks. It's a blast.
Talk soon, brother. Hey, thanks for hanging out with us on that episode. I hope you guys enjoyed that chat as much as I did. Now, listen, if you guys are hungry for more conversations like this, go swing by our website. It's basecoatmarketing.com/podcast. And finally, we are very open to feedback. So if we haven't covered a topic or there's someone you want us to chat with, please let us know. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss out on the next conversation for painters.